was a woman, one a child. One of the two men was young, probably not yet 20 years of age. The other was twice as old. They'd be wary approaching the water hole, but once they reached it, they'd let their guard down a bit. At least Coghlan could hope that would be the case. He'd learned to wait until the moment he had the advantage. He didn't fight fair. Only people who had something to prove fought fair. It was a shame, he mused, that the Apaches were traveling on foot. He and his associates augmented the scalp bounties they earned by selling any weapons or mounts appropriated from their victims. Coghlan had no idea why the Apaches were traveling through the canyon. Where they had come from or where they were going was no concern of his. It was likely that they lived in a koa somewhere nearby, apart, for whatever reason, from the several Kayatero Chiwakis or villages located in these hills. When they reached the water hole, the woman and child knelt to drink. The young man took a quick look around and followed suit. The older man slowly and carefully surveyed the canyon walls. He looked right at Coghlan's hiding place, but the distance was too great, and the scalp hunter too skilled at blending into the environment. The older Apache finally knelt at the edge of the water, laying down the rifle he'd been carrying. Coghlan raised his own rifle, drew a bead, and fired without hesitation. The bullet struck right between the Apache's shoulder blades, and the impact hurled him face down into the water hole. Across the way, Skaggs and the Mexican began shooting. The young man died next. The woman grabbed the older man's rifle and got off a few shots in Coghlan's direction. She knew in a general sense where the first shot had come from, and since she was Apache, she was going to die fighting. Coghlan admired her for that. He reloaded the sharps, oblivious to the bullets burning the air in his vicinity. He was drawing a bead on the child when the woman went down, shot dead by either Skaggs or the Mexican, and she fell sideways just as Coghlan squeezed the trigger. His bullet, meant for the child, struck her instead. The child, Coghlan couldn't tell if it was boy or girl and didn't care, had been standing frozen in shock and fear, ankle-deep in the water hole. Now, suddenly, the young one bolted, and before Coghlan could reload, disappeared around a bend in the canyon beyond the water hole. Muttering a curse, Coghlan finished loading the sharps and then quartered down the slope, moving with a lithe grace that was surprising for someone so big. He was sure the older Apache was dead, having fired the shot himself, but he wasn't going to count on Skaggs and the Mexican being crack shots. So when he got down to the canyon bottom, he approached the bodies with caution. His cohorts were making a headlong descent of the other slope, and as they came closer, Skaggs let out a whoop that echoed down the still-as-death canyon. Coghlan grimaced. As far as he was concerned, scalp hunting was serious business. But Skaggs thought of it as sport. An attitude like that tended to make a man careless, and in this country, a careless man was a dead man, sooner or later. "Hot damn!" exclaimed Skaggs, delighted. "That was too damn easy." Coghlan looked at the Mexican. The Mexican never said much, and neither did his expression. He gazed at the dead Apaches without a glimmer of emotion. "Don't just stand there," said Coghlan. "Go get the kid." The Mexican gave him a blank look, then, with a curt nod, started off up canyon at a lope. "I swear," muttered Coghlan, once the Mexican was out of earshot. "I think that one has Apache blood in his veins. Maybe we should take his scalp someday," Skaggs said and giggled. "Yeah, why don't you try someday?" said Coghlan dryly. "I'd like to see you try." Skaggs was picking up the Apache's rifles. "We'll get 50 pesos apiece for these repeaters down on the border," he said gleefully. "Almost as much as we'll get for these scalps," said Coghlan in disgust. The Mexican government was paying 25 pesos for every male scalp, 10 pesos for every female and child. "It's enough," said Skaggs. "Enough to buy some mezcal and a Mex woman." Coghlan looked askance at his partner. That was all Skaggs cared about, getting drunk and having a woman. For his part, Coghlan wanted more. He wanted enough money to set himself up for life in some Mexican town, but the money they got for killing these Apaches wouldn't go far. A night or two in a border town and they'd be stone broke again. Still, Coghlan was philosophical about it. There were limited opportunities for an ex-Confederate with only one bankable skill. A single gunshot rang out from up canyon. It was the Mexican taking care of the kid. Coghlan drew a knife from its belt sheath and went to work, starting with the older man. Grabbing a handful of the dead Apache's hair, he made a circular incision around the top of the skull, starting at the hairline. The scalp came off the dead man's head with a wet, popping sound. Coghlan put the scalp in a pouch slung over one shoulder, a pouch stained black with the blood of previous victims. He took the young man's top knot and was working on the woman when the Mexican returned, the limp body of the child under one arm. Coghlan nodded at the Mexican. He didn't know much about the man and was suspicious of his lineage, but he couldn't be denied that the Mexican was almost as efficient at killing as he was. He just wasn't sure that the Mexican could be trusted, and he never turned his back on the man. The profit turned on scalp hunting was usually pretty slim, especially when cut 3 ways. Coghlan had occasionally contemplated getting rid of his associates, and he had to assume that the thought had crossed the Mexican's mind too. Skaggs, on the other hand, was too stupid to consider it, and too scared of Coghlan to try something like that. The Mexican didn't appear to be afraid of anything. "Skaggs," said Coghlan as he finished scalping the woman, "go fetch the horses." Looking skyward, Coghlan squinted at the buzzards, already circling in the hot updrafts rising out of the canyon. It didn't take them long to find death, and they served as a signpost for anyone who might be in the vicinity. Coghlan wanted to put as much distance between himself and the water hole as quickly as possible. Other Apaches weren't the only potential danger. There was the United States Army to worry about. He and his colleagues had just killed 4 Cayetero Apaches, and for all Coghlan knew, they'd done the deed on land that was part of the Cayetero Reservation. This was something the Bluebellies would frown upon, since they were trying to avoid another war with the Apaches. What the Mexican government would happily pay him for, the Yankees would hang him for. Which was why he was more than a little annoyed when Skaggs showed up with only 2 horses and their pack mule in tow. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. "My horse too, damn it." Skaggs looked worried. "Your horse is dead, Coghlan." "What are you talking about?" "Bullet in the skull." Coghlan recalled how the Apache woman had grabbed up a rifle and fired several rounds at the canyon rim where he'd been laying in wait. His horse had been well hidden and on the backside of the rim rock. That she'd killed it had to be a fluke, ricochet possibly. Coghlan cut loose with a long string of epithets. Just his luck that something like this would happen. But he'd learned to adapt quickly, a skill learned the hard way on a half-dozen battlefields where almost nothing went the way the goddamned officers planned it. "I'm taking your horse, Skaggs," he said in a tone of voice that made it plain he would brook no objections. "You ride the pack mule." "I don't want to ride no mule, Coghlan," whined Skaggs. Coghlan scowled. "I don't care what you want. You weigh in at half of what I do. The mule can carry you and the provisions, too. Besides, it won't be for long. We'll pick up the first horse we see, and then we'll make tracks for the border." "There is a rancho," muttered the Mexican. He was pointing due east. "Hey, that's right," said Skaggs. "Spread run by a feller named Barton. No, Barlow. Yeah, that's it." Skaggs was pleased with himself for remembering. "Barlow, that's his name." "I don't care what his name is," rasped Coghlan, exasperated. He went to Skaggs's horse and climbed into the saddle. Long as he doesn't mind parting with a horse. "What if he does mind?" asked Skaggs. Coghlan glowered at him. "What do you think?" They rode away from the water hole with Coghlan in the lead, and Skaggs cursing as he kicked the mule into motion, bringing up the rear.